Hey YouTube, here to do my spoiler review for Shazam. Really quick, notice this. This is just a funny story I want to share with those of you out there. I sneezed and my thumb caught my nose. So everyone make sure to trim your thumbnails because it can lead to facial scarring. So Shazam! Exclamation point. How is it? It's great. It's a good time. Um, no matter what, you're gonna go and you're gonna laugh and you're going to enjoy the movie. It's a good time, and I encourage you guys to go watch it. I'm not really selling the movie. I just mean that there's a lot to the movie that you kind of just have to suspend your disbelief for, because the DC cinematic universe is letting go of all of attempts to realism in that. But in the same way, it's a really refreshing picture for a lot of reasons. So here's how I'll go about it. First, I'll talk about why it really worked. And then I'll talk about the things you really have to suspend the disbelief for, and then I'll talk about the DCEU moving forward. And also, spoiler alert, this is a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, I'm going to spoil some stuff for you. So why it really worked. Something that hasn't worked thus far for the DC movies has been them trying to ground too much in reality, and in doing so kind of focus more on the superhero aspect. The symbol one becomes like the Superman movies. They're all about, I have to be the symbol of peace and the hero. Whereas Shazam, what it really nails that I don't think really any DC movie has even nailed this far, is it's about the human behind within the costume. A lot of Marvel movies really get this right, but again, DC movies haven't. And why else this movie really works is it's a lot like a lot of those like 80s coming of age movies. I mean, like I guess the Goonies is a good movie. Ferris Bueller. Oh, here's a great one because it's like the same story almost. Big, because if you're a child who's given the opportunity to become an adult or to gain responsibility as a superhero, you're going to make mistakes. And mistakes are absolutely made by our protagonist in this movie, and it's beautiful how it's handled. Also, this movie does really well as emotional stakes. The subplot of the movie is Billy Baxton's going to spend his whole life trying to find his mom again, and then, spoiler alert, he finds his mom in the movie, and she's a terrible person who actually abandoned him. And you as the audience, when you watch this, you're like, okay, no mother in the world gets off the hook for just leaving her kids somewhere. But it's one of those secrets you as the audience know, but the protagonist doesn't know, so you know it's coming, and it's delivered so beautifully when it finally comes. And for our protagonist, Billy Baxton, to finally abandon that and embrace his individuality is what actually grants him the confidence to take on his newfound role as a superhero, and that's a beautiful thing. And it's whimsical. It's like a superhero movie should be. I think it strikes a balance really well too, not necessarily between it being whimsical and there being reality, rather just in the whimsical nature of it, and it doesn't take it too far into the valley of strangeness, whereas the Michael Schumacher Batman films in the 90s definitely goes full on whimsical. What's kind of great about this, since it is from the perspective of a child, the whimsical nature of it makes sense, because when you have a kid who is all of a sudden a superhero, he's going to do childlike things. Whereas if you have an adult, like Bruce Wayne in the 90s Schumacher films, to become a superhero, and he's acting like a child, it doesn't make sense because he's an adult. And of course, the Bruce Bruce Wayne subtext of he just never grew up because he parent raised him. It's and he didn't have parents and he's been a foster child, so it all makes sense. So now into the real on he's abandoned. It took a lot of digest and get that the reason why they left that there isn't for us, the audience, but to Billy Baxton to be like, oh no. But then they have a full-on, really sad moments, and they probably shouldn't have done that. The most independent movie director DC's ever had, and that's great. But that's one where it doesn't work. It's like, okay, pull that back a little bit because we want to think about our target demographic. We want to think about building an audience for the future. Marvel Cinematic Universe with Iron Man came in, built this new thing, and from that, built the momentum off of that to take these next generations and build that into today. They're losing a little bit of steam on that, but they've done a great job so far. I'll talk about that a little bit for DCU. A couple more things that didn't work first. Yeah, and the movie, as I mentioned, is kind of like an 80s coming-of-age movie. You have to kind of allow yourself to just enjoy it and not take it so seriously. And it's weird for you to do that with a DC movie because for all their movies, if you try to do this realism thing. And for Shazam in particular, there's just so many moments like that would never happen, but it's a comedy, so you have to go about it like, all right, I'm gonna just have to let go and enjoy this because I'm laughing, and it's okay that I'm laughing. Like, looking back, it's like, well, this makes no sense, but you want to have a good time, so you want to embrace that. On to the DCU stuff. This movie, as I mentioned, embraces the comedy. It also embraces the superhero aspect of it. That subverts a lot of superhero movies while at the same time parodying it, and that's great. There's one scene in the movie where it's the third act. It's maybe fourth. How many acts are in this movie? Third act, where Shazam and Black Bolt are fighting in the cityscape and are flying by buildings. And there's one kid playing with Batman and Superman figures, and at the same time he has them collide. Shazam and Black Bolt collide in front of the window, and the kid gets scared by it, and he drops the Batman superhero figures. Well, they drop on the ground, and there's a shot where the audience sees Batman and Superman on the ground laying there, and then me as a cinema television major who has taken half a dozen screenwriting classes, like, oh, well, that's DCEU saying F the past and embrace the future. The audience may not have caught that, but it's really important for the audience to understand DC needed to do this. Aquaman's kind of started it. Aquaman started it with how kind of campy they got. Shazam definitely is like, all right, guys, here's something new. Let's forget about the old movies. We're going on to new movies. And it's great. It stands by itself. You don't need the continuity of like the Batarang, the Superman bullet for it to be really connected. But this leads me to some commentary on the contrast between the DCU and the MCU. Is this may be a defining year for Marvel and DC because we're about to hit Endgame. Endgame literally is called Endgame not only because what Doctor Strange said to Tony Stark, but also because it's the end of the 22 movies that have come out thus far. There's going to be a new product coming out after this movie is over for the MCU that's going to have to reinvigorate the franchise. Whereas DCU needs to start something new, so they're both kind of starting something new this year. Endgame potentially could be, unlikely, but could be a disaster, and all that momentum they built up will be like, pardon this metaphor, but it's the only thing I can think of right now, Like if you sorry for all the kids out there. I have to really think before I speak because there are maybe children watching. Um, if you are having a good time with your significant partner and the ending of that good time is not good, the good time is ruined. I'll just say it that way. Um, for the record, my wife and I are very happy. That doesn't happen to us, just saying. But uh, just like 22 movies for MCU, if that happens, uh, as to where the 22 movies, great momentum going into Endgame, Endgame it fizzles, all however million of us fans aren't happy. Whereas DCU came out of the gate kind of unhappy with, Man of Steel was okay, Wonder Woman was pretty good, but all the others, other than Aquaman, all the others pre-Aquaman were, in my opinion, trash. Shazam is refreshing. It's like, okay, here's another metaphor. It's like being on a date, things are going kind of shitty, and then your date says, hey, let's go do something different. Let's forget about these plans we made, and let's take a risk and go do something new. And that turns into be a really good time, and you're having a good time on the date so far because you were compulsive and you guys decided to wing something. That's how you is looking right now. Of course, continuity for the story. They aren't really laying the groundwork for anything new other than the catapult and the post-credit scene, which still doesn't make sense to me, even me as a DC fan. I'm more of a Marvel fan. But when at the end of the movie you have like Superman coming out, but they don't show his face ever, and it's like, okay, I see what you're doing there, and I know Henry Cavill may be out as Superman, so you keep the story going forward. But you're saying we don't need all these stories to be connected, but they're still connected. That's kind of a beautiful thing. Anyways, I wish I could talk about this more. There's just so much going on up here. I'm probably going to see it again. I would say if you really, really enjoy this movie to the fullest, just let loose and let it be like a corny action movie. Like what you used to see in the 80s and 90s. You know, doesn't need to be a cinematic masterpiece to really enjoy it. You just need to embrace the campy aspect of superhero movies that are long since been gone since the Schumacher films in the 90s. But also, it's, harpens to the golden age of comics where it didn't have to be Pulitzer Prize winning writing in order for it to be ingested. And that's the target audience is kids. Like, other than the horror aspects of the movie, like, let superhero movies be fun for everybody. It doesn't have to be connected. And yes, it is better than Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel got weighed down so much by, we're tied to the MCU and we're gonna have Nick Fury carry this whole feature, and it pulls from the experience. So if I were to rate it, I give it a B+, and I say go watch it. Have a good time. Anyways, that's it for me, and I wish I could say more to it, but I don't want to spoil too much. There's just too many good things. Yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, sorry I spoiled some stuff, but you need to go see it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.